After 3 days of talks aimed at breaking the logjam over the Sino-US trade disputes, are there reasons to be optimistic that finally a deal might be on the table? And electric car manufacturer Tesla has started to build a giant factory in Shanghai. What will be the ramifications for Tesla and for the Chinese auto industry? And how will Tesla's strategy fit in with President Trump's Making America Great Again? Welcome to The Point, an opinion show coming to you from Beijing. I'm Li Xin. On Monday this week, Chinese and American trade negotiators began talks in Beijing amid mounting optimism that they will find a way to break the impasse in their 9-month-long dispute. The scheduled 2 days of talks were extended into a third day in a fresh sign that discussions are moving in a positive direction. It is the first face-to-face talks between the two sides since U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping agreed at the start of December on a 90-day truce. Optimism has been expressed from both sides that a reasonable settlement can be found, and if there is progress at these talks, U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer and China's Vice Premier Liu He are expected to meet in Washington as soon as next week. So what has turned around the bitter rivalry of the past few months? Is the optimism long-lasting? What would it take for such optimism to be sustained? I'm joined in the Beijing studio by Professor Zhang Jianping, Director of the Center for Regional Economic Cooperation at the Chinese Academy of International Trade and Economic Cooperation, and Professor Gong from the University of International Business and Economics. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Now, much has changed since President Trump and President Xi met in Buenos Aires, and it seems that there is an air of optimism in the room as we are still awaiting the official word coming out of the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs as to exactly what has been achieved. We have been waiting the whole day and nothing has come yet. At this moment, Professor Zhang, what do we know, what do we not know about the outcome of this round of negotiations?
I think that you mentioned optimism. So this type of sense between China and the U.S. actually based on two leaders' direction, in Argentina. They point out that two countries need to have a constructive approach to have a better relationship, economic and trade relationship. Secondly, I think that two countries actually realize that, our relationship not only related with global economy, but also for our own economic stable development. Especially that in the past months you may find that not only Chinese side suffering from trade friction, but also U.S. side did. You may find their stock market violated. Also you may find U.S. investors and residents complained about tariffs. In economics, actually tariff measure will make both sides suffering from that. So in this regard, consider that in this year we have to make stable development. That's why we need to have a constructive approach to solve problems.
At this moment, we're only hearing about what has been done, what has been said. We're only trying to look at the signs that we can find on pictures coming out of these negotiations, or at least the opening ceremony. Professor Gong, what have you seen, what have you observed about at least the atmosphere, and what are you guessing as the outcome of these talks?
Well, there are several issues lying at the center of this trade dispute, one of which, of course, is the trade deficit from the U.S. side, and the other are the structural issues that the United States calls them as structural issues. I think this round of negotiations is most centered on purchases by Chinese sides of American products to at least to alleviate the trade deficit. I mean, look at the reports that I've seen are mostly about purchases of agricultural products as well as energy products. So my feeling, and I think these structural issues will not be discussed at this level, at the deputy and ministerial level. It's going to be a much higher level. So I think this round is mostly about Chinese purchases of American products in terms of what's the big amount, over how many years, U.S.? What products are these things? And in concrete terms, I mean, you have to keep in mind that the purchase is actually quite complicated, and government doesn't purchase things. Government usually, is asking state-owned enterprises, for example, some private companies to help contribute to these purchases.
Or lower the tariffs to encourage private buyers.
Right. So the Americans probably wants to make sure that these purchases are indeed going to happen. So I think it's going to be more about the details, how these things are going to work out.
So personally, I'm afraid that within 3 days, maybe trade issues, especially China's import goods from the U.S. Because in the past year we already mentioned 250 billion U.S. dollars purchasing from the U.S. side. So given that
during President Trump's visit to China.
Yeah. So I'm afraid that some of things could be confirmed by negotiations. On the other hand, I also noticed that even if the U.S. side realized that structural issues not so easy to get solutions, especially IPR issues, subsidy issues. So that will take time.
But I also want to know that $200 billion announced when President Trump came to China, these are intentions, including intentions of purchases, not exactly all purchases.
So basically, you're saying they're not starting from scratch. They might have picked up from where they left in the past, because they had several rounds of discussions in last year. Is that what we're seeing, Professor Gong?
Oh, absolutely. I think in several rounds, actually not just one. I mean, Liu He went to the U.S. Ross Wilbur came to China. Wilbur Ross, I'm sorry, came to China. So we have a couple of rounds of negotiations already. Some of them already touch upon those structural issues. I think the U.S. side is still not happy from walking out of these previous rounds of negotiations, and they want to make sure that how we're going to implement these structural changes. How are these structural changes? These are the things going to be in the next round, I think.
But the talks fell through either while they were taking place or after both sides seem to have come to an agreement, and the United States changed their mind. That's according to our understanding. What has changed this time? For instance, the urgency that the two sides are feeling, or the approach that the U.S. is taking? Because in the past they were giving China a lump sum of things that China has to change, and China says, you are not. It's not realistic to expect it to change overnight.
The problem with last time's negotiation is that the American side doesn't really have the mandate. Wilbur Ross came to China and he negotiated a deal, and he left without announcing that. He said this is going to be. He's going to go back to Washington D.C. and ask for approval from President Trump, and President Trump vetoed it basically. Right? He's not happy with the result, even though Chinese side actually announced a unilateral agreement. But this time I think what's changing. You're asking this question is that I think the macro environment has changed a lot. The U.S. stock market, as Professor Zhang mentioned, the stock market is tanking in the U.S. right now. There's a lot of pressure from corporate America's side on Donald Trump to strike a deal quickly.
My sense is that from Chinese side, we are always keeping a rational attitude to deal with problems and the situation. However, from the United States, from U.S. side, they have different ideas from different stakeholders, even if different ministers. Also, the U.S. side actually they have so-called tactics for China-U.S. relationship. So the U.S. side.
What is the so-called tactic?
Yeah, for example, the so-called the deal, the art of the deal from the Trump. He just by this type of tactics, he's aiming for big deal or get big benefits.
So are you saying that this time they are not aiming for the big deal or the grand deal, and rather taking a step-by-step approach? If we cannot have a comprehensive agreement, maybe we can first agree on some part of the trade issue, for instance the trade deficit, and then we'll take care of the structural trade issue at a later stage. Is that possibly the case, Professor Gong?
I don't think so. I think Donald Trump is looking for a very big deal. He said himself that he's working on the biggest trade deal in history.
But again, if they're still asking the same thing, is the Chinese side making compromise and saying, okay, we give you the big deal this time?
I think both sides are going to make compromises. I mean, the big deal thing, that book is not written by himself. It's written by somebody else. I don't think, is too much into his strategy. I mean, there's a, he is influenced by many people around him, who have different agendas. Robert Lighthizer, for example, he is most interested in bringing corporate America back to the U.S. So in other words, this trade dispute is not really a means to an end. It's the end. He wants to sustain this, right? So Donald Trump is going to...
He doesn't see an interest in resolving this issue once for all. Are you saying that is the case?
I think there's agenda.
Well, then his deputy is in Beijing, right, Mr. Garage, if I get the name correctly,
right.
which is said to be very much agreeing with Mr. Lighthizer's positions. If the talks have been going on well this time, obviously they probably see an interest in resolving the trade issue.
They're talking about purchases. They are not in conflict with the agenda he has right now. These are about the structural changes he wants to bring to China. And in the meantime, I think he does have agenda to somehow bring corporate America back to the U.S. That doesn't mean that Donald Trump buys into that theory, though. Ultimately, it's Trump making the call, right? So I think it doesn't hurt things right now. Talking about purchases, alleviating trade deficits.
Yeah.
I think that the U.S. side actually they combine both trade issues and other complicated structure issues such as IPR, ISOE, and China's industrial policies. I don't think that when you mix those complicated issues, it will take a long time to negotiation. It will be impossible to get solution in short term. So in this regard, I hope that from the U.S. side, they should have more practical manners to deal with. Also, that when you are in progress of negotiation, you have to negotiate one by one. Step by step. A
serious negotiation, if it is. And that's why I'm feeling a little bit unsettled. I don't know, when I hear President Trump saying talks going really well, and I see, see people really smiling in such a complicated negotiation, I'm not feeling so well. I don't know, and we are still quite some time away from that deadline. Who knows what's going to happen this time again?
I agree that these structural issues are not going to be addressed immediately. I mean, we're talking about market access, intellectual property rights protection, a couple of other SOE issues, industrial policy, subsidies, all these things. But I think from a U.S. perspective, at least they're most concerned about IPR protection. I think at least on this issue, they're going to get it. They're going to get it. I think this is the minimum demand they are asking from this negotiation.
Some lower hanging fruits can be picked at this moment.
I'd like to emphasize on the first thing is that last May, actually we already made a deal accepted by two sides. Just Trump didn't accept that after 1 to 2 days.
So this time we should not repeat the same mistake,
Yeah, of course.
Get the consent of your capital before you sign the paper or whatever, or announce it.
We have to confess that that round of negotiation actually provided a good foundation for this time's negotiation. The second thing is that, from the last year till now, from Chinese side, we have some of important changes. For example, our President Xi declared China's, further opening up measures. For example, for banking sectors and auto sectors, more open, market access.
Hopefully, both sides will meet each other. Will find it easier to find a compromise and meet each other halfway. Okay, we're going to leave it there. Many thanks to Professor Zhang Jianping, Director of the Center for Regional Economic Cooperation at the Chinese Academy of International Trade and Economic Cooperation, and Professor Gong from the University of International Business and Economics. You have been watching The Point with me, Liu Xin. When we return after a short break, as Tesla breaks ground for a new auto factory in Shanghai, how will the arrival of a new foreign car manufacturer in China affect the industry as a whole? Stay with us.